Hello again, and welcome back. My name is Tom Nelson, and this is part 14 of the homeostasis video series. This particular one is going to be how the hypothalamus manages hormones. So hormones, or hormone levels and balance, changes in the hormone receptors and mutations in metabolic enzymes can dramatically influence your appetite and energy consumption. Weight gain is due to an accumulation of energy that was not burned, of fats particularly, and therefore stored for future use as fat. So the stimulatory neurons stimulate your appetite by secreting hormones, the neuropeptide Y and agouti-related peptide AGRP. So the inhibitory neurons will suppress your appetite by secreting those POMC hormones. And feeling of hunger can be stimulated or suppressed depending upon which hormones are secreted. The secondary neurons synchronize incoming information from the pituitary neurons, and they coordinate bodily functions by sending out signals. There are hormones that control your appetite center, either to increase your hunger or to suppress the urge to eat. So they have a short-term and a long-term action that will influence your appetite. They're instrumental in the control of your body fat. Ghrelin, which is a peptide hormone that is released inside your stomach, whenever your stomach is empty, this ghrelin will be produced. And it activates the NPY and the AGRP hormones, releasing neurons which stimulate your appetite. So whenever your stomach is empty, the ghrelin is going to stimulate the hormones that promote you to eat more. So it is released when the stomach is empty, the ghrelin is, and it quickly stops when the food enters the stomach, as soon as you eat something. So a peptide is a string of bonded amino acids. The second hormone, the PPY336, which is a small peptide that is released from very specialized cells in your intestines, which also inhibit your appetite. Insulin is released by the pancreas after you eat. Insulin has short and long-term effects on your weight control. So insulin dampens the appetite by stimulating the inhibitory neurons of your hypothalamus, those restrictive hormones. So if insulin resistance causes elevated blood sugar, which it will, the control room will signal the release of more insulin to try to remove it. We've talked about that in previous videos. So the insulin will convert the excess glucose into triglycerides, which is also known as de novo lipogenesis. And it will stuff it into the fat cells to get it out of the bloodstream, and there it will remain until it's needed. Most of that fat stored is going to have to be burned in order to get rid of it. Very little will be converted back into glucose. So amylin, the hormone we talked about in previous videos, the hormone amylin, which is unfortunately 50% deficient in diabetic, is also a peptide. It's made up of 32 different amino acid residues, and it's secreted from the beta cells of your pancreas right along with insulin, and usually in proportion to the amount of insulin produced. Amylin slows the movement of food from the stomach into the small intestine, which slows the rise in blood sugar because it slows the rate at which the food is converted into glucose and then absorbed into the bloodstream. Amylin also works with insulin to inhibit the production of glucagon, that hormone that stimulates your body to release glucose into the bloodstream. It stimulates your liver to convert glycogen, which is again that stored glucose, back into glucose and then insert it into your bloodstream. So the net result is that the liver will not be increasing the insertion of glucose into the bloodstream at a time when the blood sugars are already high. That is, as long as amylin levels are at a normal level. Normally, the liver will convert the glycogen back into glucose and insert it into the bloodstream in order to maintain the blood sugars within the set points, the normal range. And that is always constantly going on between meals as your blood sugar drops due to cells taking glucose out. So amylin controls your weight, it curbs your appetite, and it helps regulate your blood sugars. Diabetics typically have a deficiency in amylin and another hormone called incretin, which is very similar to amylin, does the same things. and both of those can be deficient in diabetics by as much as 50%. So amylin is believed to act primarily centrally. Incretin is the second one that I mentioned. It partners with amylin to curb your appetite, to control your weight, to regulate your blood sugar. It does the same things. It slows down the movement of food from the stomach into the intestines, and it also helps amylin keep the liver from dumping glucose when the blood sugars are already high, and together they create an I am full feeling. So again, diabetics are deficient in incretin by, again, 50%. So consequently, when deficient in both amylin and incretin, the food moves from the stomach into the small intestine too quickly, and it gets converted into glucose much faster. And the result is a faster rise in the blood sugar as it gets drawn into the bloodstream. The diabetic does not get that I am full feeling that amylin and incretin would normally produce. Instead, they only get that feeling when they've eaten too much and they're stretching their stomach. So the liver dumps too much glucose because of the lack of amylin and incretin, and leptin is a hormone that's coupled to food consumption, so it's well known for its role in regulating your food intake and your energy expenditure. Leptin is produced in the adipose belly fat cells, and it's also produced in the ovaries. The skeletal muscles produce it, your stomach can produce it, bone marrow, pituitary gland, and the liver can also produce it. So leptin regulates appetite and your hunger, as well as your metabolism. Leptin is made from 167 different amino acids in those endoplasmic reticulum factories inside your cells. So again, the amount of leptin circulating in your body is going to be proportional to the amount of body fat that you have in storage. Leptin acts on the leptin receptors in your hypothalamus, where it inhibits appetite, provided that it gets the message. Leptin counteracts the actions of NPY. It's a powerful appetite stimulator, and it is produced and released from the gut and the hypothalamus. So leptin also promotes the synthesis of AMSH, which is also an appetite suppressant. So it's easy to see how an absence of leptin would lead to uncontrolled eating and eventually obesity. Fasting or low-calorie diets lower the production of leptin, which is going to exacerbate the condition. So leptin is believed to partner with amylin in the regulation of weight. Both leptin and amylin, along with incretin, contribute to creating that I am full feeling as long as you have the full amount of all three of those hormones. So leptin is produced when the vagus nerve is stimulated, which runs between the brain and the abdomen. There's two of them, two vagus nerve systems. One runs on each side of your chest. So leptin shunts the body's normal tendency to accumulate fat, but the metabolism will be free to burn as much energy as required by the body. So when you diet, you decrease the amount of leptin that's produced, as I said earlier. And as stated, obese individuals have large amount of leptin in their bloodstream. So leptin does not interact with the hypothalamus to curb your appetite because of leptin resistance, because the insulin resistance causes leptin resistance, which means that the receptors on the hypothalamus for leptin no longer are sensitive and functioning properly. So it's very similar to insulin resistance. So the levels continue to climb as you become more and more obese. Everyone has a leptin floor, but none of us have a leptin ceiling. So the brain is starving while the body is obese. Leptin is also a part of the reward system. When leptin levels are low, food becomes even more appealing. But when the leptin levels in obese individuals is high, then the leptin does not impact the reward system to stop overeating. It's a vicious cycle that begins. So insulin resistance causes leptin resistance, as I said. So high triglyceride levels are going to block the transport of leptin into the brain, so it cannot reach your hypothalamus, your control room. So lowering triglyceride levels is a very important step for many reasons, not just to increase the leptin transport. So weight loss is highly dependent upon an elevated metabolism in order to burn excess fat. research has shown that leptin triggers the production of AMSH and in the hypothalamus. So the AMSH protein is one of the most powerful stimulators of an increased metabolism. It speeds up the burning of fat and glucose. So that AMSH protein stimulates your hypothalamus to produce and release hormones that travel to the pituitary gland, which in turn produces that TSH hormone, the thyroid stimulating hormone, the one that gets your thyroid producing more and more of the T3 and the T4. So it stimulates your thyroid gland to produce those T4 and T3 hormones, which is going to boost your metabolism. Because remember, it's the T3 that lights the fire in the power plants. And the more T3 that's available, the faster that system is going to work. So thyroid hormones, the T4 hormones, are going to be converted into the active form of thyroid hormone, the T3. And the T3 hormone fires up those cellular mitochondria, that furnace generator, your power plants, that produces the energy for your body. Future weight loss programs will likely focus on ways to promote the production of that AMSH hormone. So leptin is not the only signal that regulates food intake in your body or your body's weight. So there's a short-term and a long-term system that will affect your weight control. The short-term system regulates meal pattern and eating throughout the day. Changes in your blood sugar, your body temperature, the amino acids that are in your blood, and other hormones are all capable of modifying your eating patterns. Stable blood sugars stabilize mood, which prevents food cravings. So the long-term system balances food intake and energy expenditure, which is going to influence the regulation of your fat stores. So leptin functions primarily through the long-term system, where it influences the amount of food that you're going to consume relative to the amount of energy that's being generated. Leptin does interact with other components of the long-term system. It influences extensively the components of the short-term system to modulate the amount of food consumed or the likelihood of skipping a meal. Leptin increases the food intake by signaling its receptor on the hypothalamus. So the leptin receptors are also expressed in other tissues, including your pancreas. It inhibits the expression and the secretion of insulin and glucagon. Remember, glucagon is the hormone that stimulates your liver to convert and dump glucose into the bloodstream. And it's also the hormone that stimulates your fat cells to release fatty acids into the bloodstream so that they can be consumed and used. So you'll recall that the more fat that you have in store, again, the more leptin your adipose cells are going to produce. So leptin resistance in the peripheral tissues has been observed in diet-induced obese laboratory mice. Some studies suggest that leptin resistance in the pancreas, in especially the beta cells, are involved in the abnormal response of these cells to sustained elevated blood sugar, hyperglycemia. So leptin resistance coexists with obesity, hyperglycemia, high blood sugar, hyperinsulinemia, which is the elevated levels of insulin, and elevated glucagon levels as well. So when the leptin receptors in the beta cells of the pancreas are disrupted, increases in your body weight, adiposity, hyperinsulinemia, impaired glucose control by increased insulin resistance, and increased insulin production result. Therefore, it's believed that leptin resistance in the beta cells contributes to obesity and related diabetes issues. So your hypothalamus senses the decline in those leptin levels, and your metabolic rate will slow down. You will experience lower energy levels, and your hypothalamus will crank up your food cravings and your appetite. So your metabolic rate will slow down. You will experience lower energy levels, and your hypothalamus will crank up your food cravings and your appetite, and the fat will come back on. So in order for the leptin hormone to reach the hypothalamus, it has to travel through blood vessels across the blood-brain barrier. That's a fluid-filled sac that surrounds your brain, and it protects your brain in a number of ways, including not allowing certain things to pass through that would otherwise harm the brain. So then they travel to the hypothalamus. But the blood-brain barrier is a very selective as far as what it's going to allow to pass through that barrier. So the leptin levels become too high, the blood-brain barrier is going to begin to block its passage, which is going to send the wrong message to your hypothalamus. So now go to homeostasis part 15. We're going to talk about how you reset your set points. Thank you for watching this video, and please pay it forward. Thank you.